All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna go more. I'm gonna dive in deeper with the causes of the American Revolution. So once again, we're gonna start from the very bottom. I already showed you this graphic organizer in the beginning of the year. I'm just gonna go briefly into details. After I go over each of these causes of the American Revolution, I will put a brain pop video, record it, so you guys can see more information about the causes of the American Revolution. So going back based off of this, guys, so we're gonna start from the bottom. So mercantilism, if some of y'all remember this is an economy term that means that the mother country benefits from all their colonies. For instance, Great Britain owns the 13 colonies. So what Great Britain wants from the 13 colonies, they want raw materials, which are unfinished goods, which usually come from the southern colonies. And the reason why they want all these raw materials such as tobacco, cotton, indigo is so when it goes to Great Britain gets those raw materials, they manufacture it and make it into a finished good, and then they sell it back to the colonies and make lots of money. So at the end of the day, the mercantilism economy is basically a term that means that the mother country benefits and they get all the money, and they're just using their colonies for resources and for wealth. They don't really care about them. All they care about is money. So as you know, this is going to anger many colonists back then because they want to be independent. They feel that they can be more successful if they are independent from Great Britain. They can make more money. So that's one of the main causes, right? And that's starting from 1607 all the way up to 1775. And that's why colonists are getting angry. Next one, the French and Indian War. Many of y'all have forgotten about this war, but this war is the war where the French and Indians are fighting against Great Britain, and basically whoever wins this war is going to own most of North America. So as you know, the British defeat the French in North America, and now the British will have most of the land, 13 colonies, and any land west of the 13 colonies. And at the end of the day, this war costs lots of money, and I've already talked to you guys about this. This war is going to put Great Britain in debt, and because of that debt, they're going to want to obviously tax the people, the colonists. They're going to pass the Sugar Act, which means any sugar you buy from Great Britain, you're going to have to pay taxes to Great Britain. A Stamp Act, any paper products, you have to put a stamp and pay that money to Great Britain. Townsend Act is more of a tax on paper, lead, tea, and other things that the colonies used to use back then. And the Quartering Act, as you already know, the Quartering Act is going to be when you have to house soldiers. So these are the reason why they passed these laws, because they are in debt from the French and Indian War. So once again, all these things are happening, which is angering the colonists, and that's why I have an ice cream cone, because going sideways, because everything's about to fall apart. Now this one right here, the Proclamation Line of 1763. This was an imaginary line where the Appalachian Mountains are at. This line was to separate the colonists from the Native American Indians. Believe it or not, King George III and the British Parliament actually did really care about Native Americans. They didn't want the white people back then killing them, so they made this line to separate the Native Americans and the colonists so they will not fight with each other. But the colonists are very angry because they want to go to the west and they want to get all that free land, but King George doesn't want them to do that because he wants to protect Native Americans, and he doesn't want them getting killed by white colonists back then. So at the end of the day, the war is over, but after the war is over, colonists still can't go to the west to get that land because Mr. King George and the Parliament passed this law. So once again, things are piling up, and then eventually when they pass the taxes, they're going to say no taxation without representation. So it basically means that the colonists could not vote for the British Parliament. And I'm going to show you a video right now. I know I'm talking a lot. Pause it if you need to pause it. But the British Parliament are going to pass these laws to pay back the debt from this war. And many colonists don't like it. They say, why should we pay taxes? We never voted for those people. We never voted for these laws to be passed. Here in America, we have the Virginia House of Burgesses, where our voices are heard. We have the Mayflower Compact. We have townhouse meetings where we can speak our voice and our opinions And how are we going to pay taxes to a country that doesn't even care about us? They're neglecting us, and all they care about is their mercantilism economy. So everything is piling up. Eventually, we get to the Boston Massacre, where they're going to use that as propaganda because it's not really a massacre. Only a couple of people died, but they're going to use it to say that the British soldiers are killing innocent people for no reason when we know that's not true. And they're going to start sparking people to start getting ready to go to a war against Great Britain or their mother country, which will start the American Revolution. And last but not least, we have the Boston Tea Party. You have these colonists dressed up as Native Americans, pretending that they look like them so they can throw all the tea off the British boats. Some people say it's about 90,000 pounds of tea that was thrown in Boston Harbor. Mr. King George III and the British Parliament are angry because the colonists did this. And this is what's going to cause us to go to war, which is why they're going to pass the Intolerable Acts. Parliament and King George III are going to pass these laws that say that they will not open Boston Harbor until the British colonists pay back all the debt that they threw all the tea out the boat. They can no longer have meetings or any type of gatherings. It's against the law. So once again, these are intolerable, means I cannot tolerate it. So these colonists are not going to be able to tolerate these laws, which is going to cause them to want to go to war. So this is just like a very brief, summary. I expect some of y'all to remember this. If not, I'm going to put the brain pop video right now so you guys can look over it. I'll be pausing it to ask you guys questions, but these things are going to come out in your exit ticket today. So make sure that you look over that. So I'm going to go ahead and put your brain pop video on. So here we go. 3, 2, and 1.
Dear Tim and Moby, why did America break away from England? From Fauntleroy. Listen, don't answer any more letters without me, okay? Moby is partly right. The original 13 colonies didn't like being ruled by a king, King George III of England. But that alone probably wouldn't have been enough to spark the American Revolution.
Give me a second. Sorry about that. My bad, guys. Give me a second. It'll load right now. Here we go.
King George III of England. But that alone probably wouldn't have been enough to spark the American Revolution. What really got the colonists angry was not having any representation in Parliament, the British version of Congress.
So once again, the British Parliament, these are the people that make the laws in Great Britain. These are the people that the colonists wanted to vote for, but they couldn't because they were so far away. So basically they said, why should we be paying taxes when these people are the ones making the laws, but we never voted for them? So that's what it means. No taxation without representation means I don't mind paying taxes as long as I get to vote for the British Parliament. And these are the people. This is kind of like the legislative branch of America, but back then in Great Britain they don't call it legislative branch, they call it the Parliament, which is like Congress.
The Parliament could pass laws affecting American colonists, even though none of the colonists voted. Parliament passed the Quartering Act in 1765. It said that British soldiers in the colonies could stay in any private home they wanted. The families living there would have to house and feed them. The colonists were especially angry about all the taxes Parliament heaped on them. The first of these was the Sugar Act of 1764. It was a tax on sugar, molasses, and other stuff the colonies imported.
So once again, the British Parliament know that sugar, I forgot to tell you, is super important back then, not only for their teas and coffee, but molasses, all right? They used sugar, molasses to make rum, which they knew that many people made back then, especially the New Englanders, which are the Pilgrims, and they made rum, and they know that they need that, so that's why they put a tax on sugar, because they'll make lots of money immediately, because everybody drinks rum back then.
This act prompted James Otis, a Massachusetts lawyer, to famously proclaim, "Taxation without representation is tyranny." No taxation without representation became the battle cry of the colonists. Kind of a complicated battle cry, but they were saying what was on their minds. But Parliament didn't listen to the colonists. They just kept adding more taxes. The Stamp Act of 1765 taxed all legal and commercial documents, including diplomas, contracts, newspapers, and even playing cards. The colonists protested this act bitterly. They organized the Stamp Act Congress in New York City to decide what to do. Local leaders like Samuel Adams of Boston organized chapters of the Sons of Liberty. This group was pretty rough. They burned any stamped paper they could find and even tarred and feathered British officials.
So once again, like I said, the British colonists were not so innocent. They did some horrible things to the British. At the end of the day, they were not very gentlemanlike, like we already saw in the movie The Patriot. They did horrible things to the King of England. And also, I mean, the soldiers were not so bad as we see in the movie The Patriot. But to be fair, the British colonists were very stubborn and ignorant. So that's why they're not the nicest people. And as you can see, if you feather and tar someone today, like a tax collector, you're gonna go to jail. So they were doing this to these people once again. But moving on.
Many colonists boycotted British goods. That means they stopped buying them. The Daughters of Liberty helped by creating some of the things that people were no longer buying from the British, like clothing. The boycott hurt British trade, and Parliament repealed the Stamp Act in 1766. But the British passed another set of new taxes with the Townshend Acts in 1767. These acts taxed imports like glass, paper, paint, lead, and tea. It also allowed British officers to search homes and businesses for smuggled goods. All they would need were search warrants, called writs of assistance. Again, the colonists responded with boycotts and protests. Eventually, the anger boiled over in the Boston Massacre. That was an incident in 1770 where British troops opened fire on rioting colonists. 5 of the colonists were killed. The British repealed the Townshend Acts that same year, but later passed the Tea Act in 1773. Yeah, you can sort of see why the colonists might have been getting irritated at this point. The Tea Act said that colonists had to buy all their tea from England. The colonists responded with the Boston Tea Party on December 16, 1773. A group of men disguised as American Indians boarded 3 tea ships docked in Boston Harbor. They broke open the tea chests and threw them overboard. King George III and the British Parliament knew that they couldn't back down at this point, so they passed the Coercive Acts in 1774.
Which is also known as the Intolerable Acts. So that's what the British Parliament called the Coercive Acts. But when it came to the colonists, they called it the Intolerable Acts because they could not tolerate these horrible laws, which they're going to explain right now.
The acts called for a naval blockade of Boston Harbor until the tea from the Boston Tea Party was paid for. No ships were allowed in or out. The Coercive Acts were known to the colonists as the Intolerable Acts. They also banned committees of correspondence. These were groups in different colonies that exchanged letters about colonial politics. In response to the Intolerable Acts, all of the colonies, except Georgia, met in the First Continental Congress. The Congress decided to ban all trade with England until the acts were repealed. It also called on each colony to begin training militias or armies. Fighting broke out between British and colonial soldiers in Lexington, Massachusetts. It was April 19, 1775, the beginning of the Revolutionary War.
So I'm going to pause it right there. So once again, the war starts in 1775, and then after that, they're going to meet again, and they're going to make they're going to draft the Declaration of Independence, which will be passed in July 4, 1776. But first, the battle started first. Now, remember, in order for us to be independent, we need to win this war, and that's the next big step. So once again, hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, make sure to email me, or also just put in the chat box in Google Classroom, and I'll be able to answer those questions at 11 o'clock. Thank you, guys. Oh, one more thing. Remember all the taxes they were making were to obviously pay back the debt from the French and Indian War. I'm pretty sure you're not going to hear that anymore right now. Anyways, moving on.